Previously on Higurashi. It's a bit of a weird place to have a flashback. Personally, I think it would have been better just to have all that information the night Oishi made the phone call to Keiichi at his house. Like, have that a part of the rest of the conversation. And then, during this point in the game, just say, it's just like what Oishi said. And then have, like, maybe one or two lines of what he said connecting to the situation. But it was a bit of a weird pacing. But whatever. It's still good information to have. Rena stood imposingly, not answering. I had never heard such an unpleasant laugh before, except for all the other times Rena laughed in the exact same way. It had become akin to the sound of her breathing. It was no longer a voice or an expression of feeling. Rena took one step forward, still holding the hatchet high above her head. One step closer, Rena's face spread to fill out my field of vision. One step closer. Rena's nose wasn't close enough to touch mine, and was still pushing closer. I slumped down, landing squarely on my butt. It wasn't for some pathetic reason. It was all I could do to get as far away from Rena. I had the gut feeling that I couldn't let her laugh end. Because when that laugh ended, the moment I picked up on that feeling, my body moved by instinct. I sprang to my feet so fast. I sprang to my feet so fast that I couldn't believe it, and pushed Rena away with both hands. Rena was as light as a feather. Thrown about by the unbalanced weight of the hatchet, she was sent backwards, as if she had been carried off by the wind. After confirming that out of the corner of my eye, I dashed off at full speed. I was the perfect picture of fleeing like a greased pig. Get away from Rena. Run away. Survive. I couldn't think of anything other than this. While I was running, I remembered I'd been holding on to a bat this entire time. Such a worthless weapon. I couldn't believe I'd forgotten about this weapon at such an important time. I sped even further down the winding path. I didn't even feel myself grasping for breath or my legs getting heavy. My body understood it as well. If I didn't run away from here, I wouldn't live. I could hear the laughter from that simulacrum of Rena coming from behind me. It rang through the trees and in my head, and slowly chiseled away at my sanity. The grove of trees thinned out, my field of vision suddenly expanding. Where was this? For a moment, I was bewildered by the scenery I felt I knew but couldn't quite remember. I quickly realized it was the damn site. The fact that I dashed madly and ended up in a place like this gave me a bad feeling, like I was following someone's scripted plot. I had a good view of my surroundings, but I didn't see a single soul here. This was a terrible spot for someone to run, but there was no better place for an attacker. My heart was already on the verge of bursting. The muscles in my legs were screaming, but I didn't care. If I stopped here, then they might not even be able to scream for much longer. Even still, I glanced back, looking for an excuse to rest. Rena wasn't there. Instead, I saw two villagers walking around. I breathed a sigh of relief that it wasn't Rena, but a third party. Except the voice inside me rang the alarm once again. Villagers walking around weren't suspicious in and of themselves, but it bothered me. They both wore rough-looking clothes. Empty-handed, they definitely gave the impression that they were just out for a walk. But at this time of day, two adults wandering around without a purpose, it was enough to raise the questions. Ooh. But more than anything else, those eyes. They weren't chit-chatting while walking. They were both silent, heading forward, looking in my direction. Was I at the end of my rope and had finally started imagining things? I should run away. That was probably the best choice. If they weren't involved, I'd lose them easily by running. If they were part of the group after me, then they would come running after me. Either way, unless I hurried up, Rena would catch up with me. That's right, I was going to run. Deciding that, the moment I began to turn tail, both of them rushed towards me, as if they knew exactly what I was thinking. Somewhere inside me, I had jumped to the conclusion that Rena was the only thing I needed to be afraid of. I made the assumption that I didn't need to fear anything else. But right now, I realized just how blatantly wrong I was. Suddenly, the story Oishi-san told me about the demons all leaving the village to hunt prey floated through the back of my mind. I could tell they were both coming after me without even turning around because of their frantic footsteps. It was frightening, being unable to shake Rena off as she slowly closed in on me, but this didn't even compare. Being pursued with such violent ferocity, the straightforward horror was unparalleled. One of the pursuers' arms grazed my shoulder. Now it wasn't just their frenzied footsteps, but also the distinct sound of their breathing that I could hear. No, I could practically feel them breathing on me. They were already right behind me. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. Still running at full tilt, I felt the surrounding area go still. No, it felt like time itself had stopped. I turned my head back slightly in that frozen world, realizing how close my pursuers had gotten to me. I couldn't win against the legs of an adult. In less than the time it would take to blink twice, when this frozen time began moving again, they'd be right on top of me. On top of me, and then... Don't think about that, Keiichi. First, realize that you won't be able to shake them off like this. If the fact that you can't get away was a given, then you need to make a decision. Go with the right leg or go with the left. You just need to decide which one. Let's go with the left. The moment I decided that, my temporal singularity burst into pieces. Right. Left. I swung the bat in a wide arc with my right arm. Using that interior, I stopped and suddenly spun. No. The two of them were clearly startled. Momentarily losing sight of me, both of their outstretched arms ready to grab me, instead grasped at empty space. The man on the right, I applaud him for being able to figure it out, spun around to the spot I shouldn't have been, and faced me in astonishment. But it was too late. I didn't even need to swing my bat. All I needed to do was extend my arm as I turned around. It was by no means a heavy blow, but it seemed like it had enough power behind it to knock him off his feet. But just knocking him down wasn't enough to scare him away. He got back up in no time. Both of them took a fighting stance and were ready to face me. This made me certain that they weren't just two people out for a walk. They were clearly after me. It felt much easier than dealing with Rena. Just by not recognizing their faces, by not knowing them, it made things easier. I smiled wryly on the inside. It's fine if it was just a bluff. By barking out at them, I was able to fire myself up. They didn't respond. They spread out to either side of me with unbelievably calm expressions on their faces. One of them would grab onto my bat and the other one would hold me down. Was that their plan? Taking on both of them at once would be impossible. Hot sweat poured from every pore in my body. Then I just had to settle for the first move. Settle it with the first move. I stepped in and struck the first one down. Narrowing my target down to the man on the right, who had already been knocked down before, I stepped in and swung with all my might. There was no way for an unarmed person to guard against it. It would cause immense damage. If they blocked it with their arm, their bone would snap like a twig. If they turned their back to it, then it would be possible that the blow would travel all the way up to their vital organs. It looked like he was aware of this. He pushed farther through the kill zone between us and delivered a fist right into my gut. Not good. With this distance, in the position, and in this state, there was no way for me to dodge it. The world flipped upside down. I understood that I was being tossed around like a rag doll. I landed on the soft earth without a sound, feeling the grainy soil pressed against my face. It didn't hurt at all. But the moment I thought that, I suddenly felt pain coming from the abrasions on my skin, as well as the contents of my stomach being forced upward, flooding my mouth with a bitter sensation. I knew very well that I didn't have the time to relish this experience. I stood up as quickly as I could, but at that moment, the other man was already barreling towards me. Being able to comprehend calmly that I simply couldn't dodge it made it all the more upsetting. After plowing into my stomach full force once again, my assailant twisted around behind me and locked his thick arm around my neck. My throat felt like it was being crushed by an immense strength. I couldn't even contemplate that I was being strangled, or that I was about to go unconscious. My vision simply darkened, and a silent whining noise began playing deep inside my mind. It took everything I had to keep myself from blacking out. While this was happening, the other man was more than likely standing in front of me. I wasn't able to open my eyes, but I could feel that he was there. There was nothing I could do now. Unable to shake this arm off me, I couldn't run, I couldn't fight back. Dire straits. I couldn't even come up with the phrase that adequately described my situation. Whoa, okay. I don't really know who those guys were, but... Hello? A familiar ceiling. The smell of the bed and pillows, I knew them well. Was this my room? Normally, there wouldn't be anyone in my room besides me, but their presence made me spring wide awake. When I did that, pain shot through my entire body. Why was Rena in my room? Blood began to surge through my muscles and my capillaries. But Rena's smile belonged to the Rena I knew well. I knew I shouldn't let myself feel this way, but I relaxed thinking that this version of Rena was safe.
俺はどうして？
覚えてないの？
意識がなくなってからのことは全然。
My body had become more lethargic than I could ever have imagined. I guess that would be the expected outcome after exerting everything I had back there. I tried to at least clear my head, but I just couldn't shake the sluggish feeling out of my mind.
一応お医者さんにも電話したから、もうすぐ来ると思うよ。それまで横になってた方がいいと思うな。
I wasn't injured seriously enough to merit calling a doctor. But knowing that someone impartial was coming was slightly reassuring.
俺どうしてここにいるんだ？確かダム現場で。
それはレナが聞きたいな。何があったのかな。レナが行った時にはケイチ君倒れてて。
だから聞きたいのは俺の方だよ。変な二人組に襲われて。
As I talked about it, I finally remembered what happened right before I passed out. Recalling that memory and the terror that went along with it caused the fogginess around my head to clear right up. Let's forget about those two for now. I didn't expect Rena to be nursing me. I thought Rena was trying to kill me. She would have had the perfect chance while I was unconscious. Not only did she not kill me, she had nursed me back to health.
よく俺を引きずってここまで来れたな。重かったろ。
Looking at Rena's delicate frame, it was hard to believe that she had not only got me back home, but even dragged me all the way up to the second floor. Did she have some help?
ケイチ君、覚えてないの？
Rena appeared a bit surprised, but still kept her smile.
レナはケイチ君に肩を貸しただけだよ。大丈夫、自分で歩けるってケイチ君が。覚 覚えてない？
I didn't remember. My memory was fuzzy after the point where I lost consciousness.
二人組はどうした？レナが来た時、俺と一緒に、あるいはそばに二人組の男が。
いなかったよ。
She said it bluntly. The way she stated it felt slightly unpleasant. Uh-oh. I was just too timid at the time. I might have been able to force some answers out of Rena. But if I did that, then this kind Rena might transform into the scary Rena who I didn't know. Fearing that, I didn't press any further. Thinking about it, it was the obvious choice. If both of those men were there, I don't think Rena would even have stood a chance. I couldn't find a way to explain it unless I assumed she brought me here after those two were already gone. Rena was still smiling. Her eyes sparkled warmly. Yet, I felt like I was hallucinating when I saw something. Something akin to a shadow slowly creeping across her face. That small omen sent shivers down my spine. While Rena was still Rena, I needed to make contact. I needed to contact Oishi-san. Rena stopped me when I tried to get out of bed. She said it would aggravate my wounds, so I should sleep.
トイレに行きたいんだけどな。
ごめん。
Rena couldn't say anything else. While Rena stayed in the room, I quickly went downstairs to get the phone receiver in the living room. When I approached the front door, the doorbell rang. Ding dong. It must have been the doctor Rena had called. It was strange for a patient to welcome the doctor who was making the house call, but it would be incredibly reassuring to have him here for the considerable time it would take Oishi-san to get here. I carelessly opened the door with that simple assumption and regretted it almost instantly.
ミオン。
あれ？元気そうだね。倒れてたって言うから様子見に来たんだけど。
なんで俺が倒れてたって知ってるんだよ。
レナが電話してきたから。他に理由が必要？
I understood why she would call a doctor. But why Mion too? Rena was descending the stairs behind me.
レナ、ケイちゃん大丈夫そうだよ。たく、心配して損した。そうだね。レナも心配して損したかな。
They both began laughing. It appeared to be a cheerful laughter, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a darkness looming over them.
うわ、何この下駄箱。どうしてたの？
The shoe rack that I smashed to pieces had been like that since yesterday.
転んでさ。その拍子に持ってたバットで叩いちゃったんだよ。
持ち慣れないもん振り回してるからこういうことになるんだよ。
I kept the fact that it was none of their business to myself. I kept the fact that it was none of her business to myself.
でもこれじゃおばさまたちが帰ってきたらびっくりしちゃうね。後でレナが片付けておくね。さあ、ほらケイちゃん、 重病人なんだからちゃんと寝てないとダメだよ。さあさあ、お布団に戻った戻った。
Both of them urged me up the stairs. I had no chance to call Oishi-san. I was pushed into my bed. As it was the first time Mion had been in my room, she began searching around it intently. She fiddled around my room and was scolded by Rena. You can imagine how it went. It was uncomfortable having my room poked around, but the conversation was so benign that it was heartwarming. During that innocent conversation, Mion said something as though it was perfectly ordinary.
レナ、監督には電話した？
うん。みーちゃんに電話した後すぐにね。すぐ来るって言ってたよ。
Director? That out-of-place word gave me a bad feeling. Rena called a doctor, then called Mion, and after that she called a director? Who was this director? Since Rena and Mion's conversation was so peaceful, it only felt slightly odd.
二人とも何の話をしてるんだよ。監督ってなんだよ。
ケイちゃん死んないの？監督って言ったら監督だよ。
映画の監督とか工事現場の監督とか。
I dug through all my memories of a director who might have business with me. Only one thing came to mind. What Rena had just said. That construction site foreman. The very first victim of the first incident, the dismemberment at the damn construction site. The foreman? But that was strange. He was supposed to be dead. There was no way they could call him.
お前らが何の話をしてるのかわからないよ。その監督が俺と何か関係あるのか？来るって言ったけど、うちに来るのか？
I asked one obvious question after another. But all the two of them did was smile coldly at each other. There was a huge difference between how the two of them appeared and how my suspicions were playing out. Slowly, I felt discomfort and panic welling up inside me. I couldn't understand what Rena and Mion were talking about.
ケイちゃん、最近は野球に凝ってるんだよね。監督、それ聞いたら喜ぶと思うな。
だから監督って誰だよ。
監督は監督さんだよ。
だから監督って誰だよ。
Rena and Mion looked at each other and laughed haughtily. That disturbing cackle unpleasantly resounded around me. That laugh, long enough to be unsettling, ended abruptly.
そうだ。監督が来る前に済ませとくかな。ケイちゃん、覚えてるかい？
Her face was laughing, but Mion's eyes told a different story.
覚えてるって何をだよ。
ケイチくん忘れちゃったのかな。罰ゲームなんだよ。罰ゲームなんだよ。忘れちゃったのかな。 おはぎの宿題。どれがレナの作ったおはぎかを当てる宿題。あれ、確か宿題忘れだったよね。
I certainly did have that homework. But I had thrown away the rest of the mochi after I found that sewing needle. So I wasn't able to answer which one Rena made. That penalty for that? Why now? No doubt my questions was written all over my face. Their answer to my question was that dry laughter. I could no longer make heads or tails of anything. I began to think that this entire day was somehow insane. Strange. Incomprehensible. Being chased by Rena? Attacked by strange men? The penalty Mion and Rena were talking about? What were these two laughing at? It didn't take long for me to realize I had been dragged into an abnormal situation. Who were these two? Who were these people? Who were these doppelgangers of Rena and Mion? Rena had gotten behind me at some point. Why was she pinning my arms behind my back?
何の真似だよ。
動かないでね。罰ゲームだから。
My body was already very sluggish, and Rena pinning my arms made it that much harder to move. I seriously tried to struggle, but she wouldn't even budge. My panic began to well up, and I realized that this was well beyond the realm of jokes and pleasantries. This freakishly monstrous strength. It would have been impossible for the Rena that I knew. Then, these thin, frail arms grasping me firmly. Whose arms were they?
ケイちゃん、抵抗しちゃダメだよ。快速代、何錠でもいいや。罰ゲームに抵抗しちゃダメなんだからさ。
Mion. No, the thing that looked like Mion spoke to me like how Mion would speak to me. But I was certain that this was not Mion. Someone who wasn't Mion. Someone who was just pretending to be Mion.
監督が来る前に済まさないとね。
Mion fished into her pockets and pulled out something bizarre. I could tell what it was just by looking, but for such a thing to be in her pocket, my mind wouldn't accept it.
なんだよ、それ。
It was a small syringe. It was a small, clear syringe, the kind a doctor might use if you went to them with a high fever. Rena held me even tighter, and I could hear that clattering laughter that no longer sounded like laughter blaring into my ear. That eerie laughter. It wasn't something that the Rena I knew could ever produce with her own throat. This thing that was pretending to be Rena, was this their real laugh? Unable to defend myself, the syringe Mion was holding drew closer. And that needle tip was waved in front of my face countless times.
大丈夫大丈夫。痛くないから痛くないから。
何をする気だよ。 れは一体何の真似だよ。
ケイちゃん、何言ってんだか。分かってんでしょ。
何が？俺には何が何やらさっぱりわからねえよ。
知ってるくせに。今さらかまととぶられてもな。
わけのわからないことを言って俺を煙に巻くのはやめろ。
富武さんと同じ目に遭ってもらう。
The same as Tomitake-san? I didn't really understand what she meant. What did that have to do with the syringe?
ケイチくん、とぼけてるね。うすうすは気づいてたくせに。
Rena whispered into my ear, laughing as she admonished me. But even the way she spoke was repulsive beyond compare. Playing dumb? Me? About what? What do you mean, the same as Tomitake-san?
みんな初めはひき逃げされたものだと思っていました。ですが、意識を確かめるために近づいた警官はすぐに異常に気づきました。喉がね、引き裂かれていたんですよ。
ナイフとか？
爪でした。
Nails? Nails as in fingernails? With those gouged through? That's right. Tomitake-san had clawed out his own throat with his own nails and died. There's no way someone could die like that. So then, for that to happen...
薬物を疑いましたが、そういう類のものは検出できませんでした。
That's right. The police didn't find any drugs in Tomitake's system.
警察は富武さんの遺体から薬物は検出できなかったって言ったぞ。
Gweh, 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 gweh. I'm sure that's a laugh, but I'm just reading it as it says. Gweh. The two of them laughed together with a sickening laughter. Of course they'd laugh. To assume that such a medicine didn't exist just because the police didn't know about it was completely foolish. Meaning, the drug that caused Tomitake-san to die in such a bizarre manner did exist. If Mion injected this into me, then that would probably be all the proof I needed. That would basically mean I'd end up dying the same as Tomitake-san. Become hysterical, scratching out my throat in my last moments, then die. For such an outrageous drug to exist, for Mion to be holding it, and that I was about to be injected with it. At that moment, I did not feel there was any need whatsoever to question it. What kind of idiot, when he's trying to dodge a ball flying straight into his face, has time to think of a reason as to why it's flying at him?
観念しなって。んじゃ。
Mion's actions lacked any gravitas, which made it even more terrifying. There was none of the ceremony, like when someone is sentenced to death. There was no hesitation at all, as if she was brushing her teeth. Mion reached out with one hand and grabbed onto my chest. It felt like electricity had run through the back of my head, and the entire world had gone dark. Did I stand up too fast? Or did someone hit me really hard from the back of the head? Having lost my sense of balance, I was assaulted by a wave of dizziness. Oh, well, don't leave me in suspense. What happened next? Still waiting. I squatted down for a bit. When I came back to my senses, my entire room had changed drastically. The numbness in my head was gone, and slowly, I could tell blood was flowing to my extremities again. How long had I been squatting here? How many minutes? Or has it been hours? It was almost as if the hands on the clock had stopped moving the entire time my eyes were closed. That's how little time passed. Really? The air in the room wasn't filled with that madness from before, only the dull silence. Rena wasn't there pinning my arms, and Mion wasn't there about to inject me with a needle. No way. Could it be? All of it? Was a hallucination? There was no other presence in the room beside my own. It was the weirdest experience I'd ever had. I was certainly with Rena and Mion. I doubted my sanity for a moment, but I was also seized with some sort of comfort. I guess that terrible ordeal was a hallucination. Neither Rena nor Mion, they would never do something so terrible. My head grew hot. I could tell my emotions were welling up. Why? That wasn't a reason to cry. Why? It was sorrow. Why was I sad? I don't understand. I don't understand. Kind to everyone, not discriminating against age or gender. Mion. That Mion was sprawled by the window in an unnatural pose. Blood stained her, a deep red from head down to her chest. The bright crimson smeared on the walls that splattered had undoubtedly come from Mion. She always had that bright smile. It was kind to me from the day I transferred. Rena. That same Rena was slumped at my feet and was making the same pool of blood as Mion. I couldn't comprehend what had happened. Did someone come to save me? Then they beat these two down with this metal bat? I finally noticed the weight in my right hand. How long had it been there? It was Satoshi's metal bat. It was covered in deep red, and there was no doubt that this was the weapon used to mutilate both of them. And I was holding that weapon. I was the only person in the house. Looking at this objectively, I couldn't think of anyone other than myself who could have done it. That's right. Keiichi Mayabara. Of course I did it. I told myself gently, as if coaxing myself. Hey, me. There's no reason for you to remember it, nor is there a need to regret it. Eat or be eaten. You get that, don't you? Neither Rena nor Mion had moved an inch. It wasn't just a split forehead and a trickle of blood. Nothing that simple. The entire room was splattered with red, and that told me it didn't end with just 2 or 3 strikes.
死んじまったのか二人とも。
The depths of my mind were calm, but on the surface, I was panicking and agitated. Calm down, Keiichi Maebara. What happened to your usual calm self? Come on, now. Do like you always do. Throw your head back and take a deep breath. Come on. Once, twice, breathe deeply. Calm down. Calm down. I chanted that over and over in my head and relaxed. Color came back to my vision, and smells infused the air. At the same time, I remember what happened when I blacked out. Rena and Mion had attacked me. They were about to inject me with whatever caused the same symptoms as Tomitake's-san. But right before that, I fought back. I twisted my whole body and threw Rena as she was pinning my arms. Then I followed through with my spin and ran my foot as hard as I could into Mion's torso. It was soft. Rena tried jumping on me, so I tackled her as hard as I could and slammed her against the wall. I didn't let that brief moment of having them off balance slip by. Satoshi's bat that was left carelessly by the side of my desk. Bleep. At that moment, everything went pitch black. There was nothing recorded past the point in the videotape of my mind. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't that there was nothing recorded. It was recorded just fine. Just the other me inside myself had told me not to look and had turned off the TV. Just because the screen had gone black and I couldn't see it didn't mean that the videotape within me hadn't recorded it. The TV was just off. The video was still playing. The tape within me, creaking along, still playing. On the other end of that pitch black screen, that horrifying video was still playing on. Compared to this, though, the scene right before my eyes, was still difficult to take in. There was blood splattered everywhere on the walls, the two of them in these unnatural poses. Not a sign of movement from them. I couldn't even tell if they were breathing. No matter what the circumstances were, my friends, these girls, I had attacked them. I may have even killed them. But if I hadn't done this, I would have been the one done for. Balancing that out on my imaginary scale, it felt odd that I even feel bad about it. Even if it was a bit excessive, it was justifiable self-defense. The proof was all here. The two of them collapsed here, and Mion's syringe. Mion's syringe, filled with some unknown drug that would certainly solve the mystery surrounding the incident with Tomitake's-san. And from the fact that both of these two were involved, they'd be able to pick out the criminal one after the other. Still, I might be suspected for this. But that was just fine. Anyway, Now this should be a police affair. This wouldn't fade into darkness like Rena's past incidents. As long as the police were involved, that should bring things to a close. They'll probably revisit their investigation on the chain of incidents. Oishi-san would definitely get to the bottom of this. Meaning my wish of not wanting to die, of wanting to know the truth, that would be fulfilled in the most basic form. It was all a matter of time now. The doctor Rena called should be getting here soon. I'll confess everything to him. I needed to contact Oishi-san. At that moment, I remembered. Besides the doctor, a director had been called. It was easy to imagine that there was someone deeply involved in the incidents, judging from Rena and Mion's conversation. The ache in my chest, caused by the gruesome deed I'd done, dissipated rapidly. It was not over yet. This place was no longer safe. Stay calm, Keiichi Maebara. It's not over yet. I needed to live long enough to tell the police of this incident. At that moment, I felt like I heard someone's voice from outside. Since people were speaking, it must mean that there was more than one person. I moved the curtain ever so slightly and peered outside. It was a bizarre sight. About 4 or 5 grown men were all gathered at the gate. They very much resembled the 2 men that had assaulted me at the dam site today. Those 2 might even be among them. There was one person there wearing a white coat, but he didn't look like a doctor at all. My gut told me he was in disguise, only posing as a doctor. That guy who would probably ring the bell and get me to open the front door. Pretending to be a doctor to get me to open the door, and then the rest of them would all rush in at once. At that moment, I saw a car parked behind the men, and my heart nearly skipped a beat. The white van. No mistaking it. That van, the one that had tried to run me down. The man in the white coat entered the gate and headed towards the front door. The rest of the men hid in the bushes and watched him. I probably couldn't pretend that I wasn't home. Undoubtedly, they'd just break the window and enter. I needed to get out of here somehow. Then, use a public phone to contact Oishi-san. Then meet up somewhere. First of all, I need a weapon. Then shoes. But before all that, there was one thing that I had to do. I had no intention of dying. I'd live and reveal the truth about the nonsensical curse of Oyashiro-sama. But what would happen from here on, regardless of how determined I was, may bring about my demise. And that's why there was one thing more important than getting out of here right now. I need to get that clock out quickly and take down the note hidden behind it. Damn it. The tape was sticking to it fast. It'd be fine if it was torn a little. I opened the slightly torn note and began writing another passage with the ballpoint pen. If I wasn't able to inform Oishi-san, then the only thing I could do is rely on this note. I never thought that a piece of torn, college-rolled notebook paper could be this reliable before. I had no time. I'd only write what I knew right now. I needed to leave some sort of information that would lead them to uncover the truth. Rena and Mion are conspirators of the perpetrators. This was an undeniable fact. I still didn't want to believe it, but it was a fact. Anyway, I'd leave all the information that would help lead to them finding the perpetrators. There are 4 or 5 adults, maybe more. They have a white van. This was everything I was able to see from the window. There may be more. Also, there was an unidentified person known as the director. To begin with, the term director didn't even mesh with Hinamizawa at all. If they were going to include the directors from the past incidents, then the only one is the construction foreman, the victim of the first murder. The very first victim in the chain of incidents. Killed in a lynching, his body divided into 6 pieces. His right arm was never discovered. The police should have confirmed that death. But Rena and Mion did both call him director. They said director. They wouldn't use that term to refer to someone who was dead. The police would never even conceive that someone who was deceased could be involved. Could that be some sort of oversight? I didn't know. But even if I didn't know, it could be a big hint for Oishi-san. That's right. They needed to start fresh from this first incident. It wasn't just a simple dismemberment, but the start of the string of mysterious deaths that would follow. So then, there must be something hidden there. Please, reinvestigate the victim of the dismemberment incident. He's alive. His death should have been established after an autopsy. Logically, you would think as much. But was that really the case? Could it have been some sort of ploy that they were able to deceive the police with? I shouldn't jump to conclusions. But he may still be alive. I had no time to ponder that right now. Oh yeah. There's something even more important that I needed to write. Tomitake-san's death was from an unknown drug. That's right. That drug. It was an irreplaceable piece of evidence. No doubt, just by having this, everything would be uncovered. I couldn't just leave that vital clue lying on the floor. This syringe is proof. Writing that down, I stuck the syringe on the back of the clock with plenty of tape. So it absolutely would not slip out or fall to the floor. Firmly. Ding dong. The bell rang. They were here. I couldn't write anymore. But even still, there was one last thing that I had to write. I have no idea why it has become like this. This may be the closest thing to the truth out of everything I wrote onto this note. If you are reading this, then I am probably already dead. Though you may or may not find my body. If I was going to write out everything that could happen, either dying from the curse or being demoned away, you who are reading this, please uncover the truth. That is my only desire. With this, my last will and testament was complete. It wasn't certain that I was going to die, but it was my final plea, just in case. I folded the note, stuck it back onto the back of the clock, and returned the clock back to its usual spot. I couldn't help but pray. Oishi-san, if something happened to me, I leave the rest to you. After that, I gazed down slightly at Rena and Mion. This was probably the last time we'd ever see each other. Rena. Mion.
俺みんなのこと本当に友達だと思ってたんだぜ。
But why did it end up like this? I never had any fun in my previous school. I only worried about standardized test scores, about if the school I hoped to get into was where I really wanted to go, or a safety net. That was all I talked about. It was a dull life. The people I called friends were also my rivals in studying, in competitions, and personal records, and standardized test scores. Everyone here taught me how unhealthy that lifestyle was. This month was really fun. Making a fuss over lunch, making a fuss over the club, making a fuss over the festival. Something hot began dripping from my face. Uncontrollable tears. I should have no obligation to shed tears for them. But they wouldn't stop. Even if they were after my life. Even if they were trying to kill me. Everything that happened this month, I wouldn't forget it. Or could it be those happy days were all a facade as well? Was it all a trap, meticulously orchestrated up until today to ensnare me? Could it have been that I had just arbitrarily assumed that they were my friends? That couldn't have been the case. Both Rena and Mion, they really were my friends. Those happy days, there was nothing fake or unclear about them. Someone probably forced them to try to kill me. Or their minds were taking over, possessed by the supernatural entity known as Oyashiro-sama. Regardless, both Rena and Mion, they were my best friends ever. And when they were coming after me, it wasn't of their own volition. But they weren't the kind of people to sell off their friends, no matter what means were employed to force them. And there was no way such a thing as being possessed by Oyashiro-sama could happen in reality. Then, did the real Rena and Mion come after me? What was I thinking? What a silly, dumb idea. Having beaten down both Rena and Mion, I was still debating if they were the real ones or fakes. There was no real or fake. Only the reality that was before me. Rena and Mion were sprawled out at my feet. That was the only truth. I was only trying to twist the facts to my benefit that I had beaten up my friends to death. No matter how I spun it, it wouldn't change reality. Rena and Mion were both dead. It felt like there was a crack in the dam of strange emotions I was holding back. It felt like my calm state, which was nothing more than a bluff, had receded, and in that opening, insanity was leaking out. I killed them. I killed them. Rena and Mion. I killed them. The doorbell rang again. The unrelenting echo pulled me back into the state of composure once again. I didn't have a moment to spare. Quickly, I need to get away. I didn't want to die. I would uncover everything after that. The identity of whoever or whatever had pushed me this far. Even if I had to drink mud and eat grass, I would survive. I would survive. I would definitely survive. I killed Rena for that very reason. I also killed Mion. I went that far just to keep living. So I can't die. For my sake, and for the sake of the late Rena and Mion. I have to survive. I ran towards the door and grabbed my shoes. The doorbell rang again, as if to urge me on. Behind the single, solitary door, they were there. Keeping quiet, I headed towards the kitchen. Headed towards the back door. Before opening the back door, I put my ear to it and checked for people outside. No one? After I put on my shoes, I opened the door slowly so as to not make a sound. A piercing voice echoed out. That voice stabbed through me, getting my hair on end. I had to run. Get out of here, Keiichi. One after the other, I felt stuff like rational and intelligence, those things you use when you have time to spare, spill out of me. I didn't feel any pain from the branches scratching my arms and forehead. My autonomously pulsing heart also felt neither fatigue nor pain. My entire being just wished to live. There was nothing else it desired. It probably had no complaints whatsoever. So of course I wouldn't feel fatigue. I just ran. Just recklessly rushing in the direction I was already heading. Even if nobody was chasing after me, I'd still be running like this. There wasn't a thought in my mind about where I was headed. Turning around, I felt a presence right next to me. That presence was, without a doubt, chasing after me like a shadow. If I took even one misstep, I would be devoured. That's what I thought. So I didn't turn around. I didn't stop. I ran. At full speed. Okay, I'm not even gonna try to make that sound serious. Qua 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 qua. That was it's the chirping of the Higurashi telling me it was evening. So it's more like qua 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 qua. Trying to tell me something, and then I finally heard it. The wailing cry of the victims who didn't make it. Would I be joining them? Qua 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 qua. I never really thought to put that sound into word form. Only the Higurashi knew. They knew everything. They definitely knew. So, I ran towards where I could hear more of the Higurashi's chirp. But the farther I ran, the farther away their chirping became. I couldn't get near them. Why are you all running away? Was it my fault? Was I the one to blame? Then I'll apologize. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I felt that only the Higurashi knew. Pay no mind to me, I'm just running for my life, talking to bugs along the way. Oh? Chased by shadows. Neat. The smoking room was filled with a cloud of cigarette smoke. The expensive smoke filter gave off some crackling electric noise, but it didn't seem like it was doing anything at all. Why do smokers have to be shoved so far down this corridor where the sun didn't even reach? I recalled hearing that the tax revenue from tobacco was about a tenth of the municipality's revenue. We weren't the most heavily taxed members of the municipality, so I really wished they'd show us a little more respect.
どうしてこれがウーマン切りなんすか？街が狭くなっちゃうっすよ。
One of the younger detectives was having a staring contest with the Mahjong magazine called Next Turn.
ウーマン切ってもテンパイ崩れませんから、海底にかけるなら両面で受けた方がチャンスあるんじゃないですか？
クマちゃん、川を見てください。ウーマンは全員切ってますから安牌なんですよ。終盤で K 点に走った誰かがダマで待ってたら嫌でしょ。
The kid let out another groan, put out a cigarette, then took out another one.
納得いかないっすね。わざわざ自分で当たり牌減らすなんて。
ちなみに海底で当たり牌出しても論しちゃダ
All
メで
right.
すよ。
I know absolutely nothing about mahjong, so this is all just like white noise to me. Can we fast forward to Keiichi still talking to cicadas and whatnot?
どうしてですか？
Just then, I heard a voice coming from down the hall.
大石さん、いますか？一般の方から凱旋です。
ありゃ、こりゃどうも。それじゃ、ちょいと失礼。
どうして論しちゃダメなんすか？あ、待ってくださいよ、大石さん。
The man sitting in the seat Oishi-san was heading towards waved at the telephone receiver.
凱旋です。報酬から。
どうもすいません。お待たせしました。大石です。もしもし。
大石さんですか？もしもし。
前原さんじゃありませんか。どうもどうも、こんにちは。
From the tone Mayabara-kun's voice, I already knew he was in a predicament. This was the first time Mayabara-kun had phoned me, and he was calling from a payphone.
落ち着いてください。何がありました？
His voice was erratic over the line. He had completely lost his sense of composure. After checking that nobody else could hear, I prompted him to a hushed tone.
何があったんです？落ち着いて前原さん。今そこに近場の警官を行かせます。私もすぐそっちに行きますよ。
多分無理です。
His voice was quivering and hoarse. He wasn't surrounded by people, even if he was making this call, was he?
前原さんは今公衆電話からかけてますよね。どこの公衆電話ですか？
There were no other sounds besides Mayabara-kun's voice. It had to be a phone booth. I scratched out a note and thrust it at my colleague sitting across from me. Hinamizawa phone booth. He understood quickly and hastily started on the initial lines.
落ち着いて前原さん。今どういう状況なんです？
It was best practice to avoid flustering someone panicking, but this was an urgent case. Mayabara-kun didn't just get in trouble, get away, and then call me. He was in the midst of something dangerous right now. But yelling at Mayabara-kun right now would just needlessly cause him to be even more frantic. Mayabara-kun wasn't just calling to seek help. He was trying to tell us something more than that. And whatever it was, if I didn't get it from this call, I was certain there would never be another chance. My colleague pushed the note in front of me. There's only one booth in Hinamizawa. A patrol car's on the way. 5 minutes.
かかりすぎです。警らには何人乗ってます？
2人です。
Not enough. If it was like I imagined, there were likely quite a few people surrounding Mayabara-kun. 5 minutes was too long.
南沢の駐在さんには電話しました。
定時巡回の時間です。家人は留守で連絡不能。
そう。くまちゃん、車を回してください。
了解っす。
もしもし、おじさん。
もしもし、大丈夫です。ちゃんと聞こえてますよ。
There was something wrong with Mayabara-kun. That wasn't a normal coughing sound. Vomiting? Or was it blood? Had he already been attacked? Was he injured?
前原さん、今そこに警官が向かってます。2、3分で到着しますから何とか持ちこたえてください。もしもし、聞こえてますか？前原さん。
I could hear on the other end of the line that he was having a coughing fit. The worst possible situation popped into my head.
前原さん、犯人は誰です？何人なんです？
俺も最初は人間が犯人なんだと思います。
I couldn't tell if that was a cough or vomiting.
大丈夫ですか？前原さん。
犯人は人間なんだって。お社様のたたりなんかないんだって。ついさっきまで。だけど、やっぱり。
It was an intense bout of coughing, then vomiting.
でも、やっぱり、お社様ってのは、います。今。
前原さん、どうか落ち着いて。
なんかさっきからおかしいと思ってたんです。ずーっとつけてくるんですよ。走っても走っても走っても走っても影みたいにぴったりくっついて、だけど少しずつ俺の背中にいじり寄ってくるんです。
前原さん、そいつは今ひょっとして前原さんの後ろに
すぐ後ろに。
お願いです。前原さん、怖いのはわかります。ですがお願いです。あなたの後ろに誰がいるんです？
振り向けるわけないじゃないですか。振り向いたら俺
怖いのはわかります。 しても教えてほしい。ちょっと振り返るだけでいいんです。前原さんの後ろに誰がいるんです？
Right after I said that, I could hear him vomiting intensely. What followed was a nightmarish sound.
前原さん、あんたまさか喉を引っかいてたりはしないでしょうね。
There was no answer, but I could hear something like scratching. There was a bang, as if something was being hit. Mayabara-kun had probably dropped the receiver. I could hear groaning and vomiting over on the other end, and a repeating, abnormal noise.
もしもし、もしもし、前原さん、もしもし。
I knew how far away my voice would sound on the other end, but I couldn't help but shout. At that moment, I heard whispering coming from the other end. I couldn't tell what he was saying. From the way he was saying it, he was talking to himself? Or was he talking to someone there?
もしもし、前原さん。
Rather than whispering, it was some kind of mantra he was chanting over and over. I focused my senses trying to pick up on what he was saying. What was he repeating? What exactly? Beep. Suddenly, the line went dead. Did he use up his time? It was because it was a payphone. It was because it cut out so abruptly. The last thing he said came out clearly in my mind.
おいさん、車は OK っす。おいさん。
ごめんなさい。
おいさん。
That's what he was repeating over and over. He said, "I'm sorry." I had a gut feeling. There was no longer a need to hurry. I could hear the chirp of the Higurashi spilling in from the open window. Quee, 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 quee. I should have been able to hear them this entire time. I just wasn't paying any attention. Why did I focus on them all of a sudden? Quee, 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 quee. Were they trying to tell me something? Only the Higurashi knew. That's how I felt. June 1983. In Hinamizawa, a remote village near Shishibone City, there was a murder involving two female students. The suspect is Keiichi Mayabara, age blank teen. The suspects called over his two female classmates, ran over Yugu, Mion Sonozaki, to his house, and beat them to death with a metal bat. The scene of the crime was the suspect's room on the second floor of his house. The inside of the room was covered with the significant quantity of splattered blood, and there were signs of a struggle with the victims. In addition to the scene of the crime, the entryway, living room, and kitchen all had traces of a struggle. At the entryway, the shoe rack and wall had evidence of being impacted by a strong blunt force. It is believed to have been the same bat as the murdered weapon. Having no traces of blood, it is believed that the destruction occurred before the murders. There is the possibility that the suspect overpowered his victims to keep them from fleeing. In the living room, the rug had been pulled back, then thrown aside. It is hard to believe that this had a connection with the struggle with the victims, and thus the reason for this remains unknown. In the kitchen, the garbage bag was torn apart and its contents were spread out on the floor. Garbage was strewn about in the surrounding area, and handprints believed to belong to the suspect were discovered. It is believed that the suspect had for some reason taken out the garbage and struck it with his fist. The reason for this remains unknown. In addition, there was a note stuck to the fridge. The words, "Was there a needle?" written on it. The meaning behind this remains unclear. Just in case, the garbage was searched, but a needle was not discovered. Though the garage door was functional, it had been left open ever since the suspect moved in. The garage door was found closed. The suspect's fingerprints were discovered on the garage door. The reason behind this remains unknown. The suspect fled the scene of the crime. However, a patrolling officer, Hinamizawa local PD, found the suspect collapsed inside of a phone booth. At the time of discovery, the suspect was unconscious in crucial condition. He was rushed to the local hospital for treatment, but did not regain consciousness and died 24 hours later. The results of the autopsy indicate the immediate cause of death to have been hypovolcanic shock. It was determined that the suspect had clawed out his own throat with his fingernails, and the resulting bleeding caused his death. With the similarity to the death of Tomitake-san the prior week, the police believed there to be a connection and have opened an investigation. However, due to the wishes of the local authorities, it will be a confidential investigation. Due to the abnormal nature of the death, it was suspected that drugs were involved, but as with Tomitake-san, no traces were discovered. What prompted all this remains inexplicable. As such, this case is being treated as an act committed on impulse. However, with several accounts of the suspect's bizarre behavior leading up to the incident, it is possible that this was premeditated. Separated from his group of friends, isolation, inexplicable behavior. Several days before the incident, the suspect began carrying around a metal bat. Okay, so we know why he pushed aside his carpet and tore up through his trash. It was all looking for a needle. But the police don't seem to realize that, so from their point of view, like, this is a crazy guy, like, just making a mess of things and then killing his friends. So it's interesting to see the perspective from the police view after we have spent the entire story in Keiichi's point of view. Like, we're on his side and we know why he's doing these things. It's, like, really cool. The suspect was overheard displaying aggressive behavior as well as talking to himself at school. His classmates have already heard portions of what he was saying. 2 days before the incident, the suspect declares to his parents the possibility of his death. Due to these circumstances, police have begun an investigation on the possibility that this crime was not committed on impulse, but was instead planned several days in advance. Afterwards, a note was found in the suspect's room that he had written himself. The note was written on 2 sheets from a B5 college-ruled notebook that had each been torn in half. And as if trying to conceal it, it was stuck behind a clock on the wall. The contents are as written in the appendix. The police believe it to be strongly related to the incident. The police changed their line of investigation based on the possibility that the suspect was involved in some sort of incident himself. However, no further clues were found, casting doubt on the credibility of the note. Was the crime impulsive or premeditated? With the situation unclear and no further developments, the case had been labeled as unresolved. However, the following year, suspicion aroused regarding the nature of the note. The note was not written on 2 halves of B5 paper from 2 separate sheets, but was originally a single sheet of B5 paper. In order to erase several lines from the middle, someone had torn them out. Judging from the size of the letters, the missing section is estimated to be 2 to 3 lines. It is highly probable that the person who eliminated the lines in question is not the suspect. In addition, judging from traces of large quantities of cellophane tape being stuck to the back of the clock, speculation that something other than the note was stuck there has arisen. The person who first discovered the crime was a detective rumored to have connection with the incident, Kuroda Oishi. He underwent voluntary questioning, but denies involvement in any damages to the note. The suspect's note. I, Keiichi Maebara, am in fear of my life. I do not know why they are after my life. The only thing I do know is that it has something to do with Oyashiro-sama's curse. Rena and Mion are conspirators of the perpetrators. There are 4 or 5 adults, maybe more. They have a white van. This is all on the first sheet. The section below this has been ripped out. This is from the second sheet. The section above this has been ripped out. I have no idea why it has become like this. If you are reading this, then I am probably already dead. Though you may or may not find my body. You who are reading this, please uncover the truth. That is my only desire. Keiichi Maebara. Whoa, was that the end? Yeah, I think that is the end. And that concludes the first chapter of the game. Yay. Alright, so to recap, Keiichi beat Mion and Shion to death because they were about to inject him with a syringe, and then he ended up clawing out his own throat. And that's just how it ends. I should probably explain. In the Higurashi series, how it works is that there are, like, each chapter is its own story arc. Like this one, it kind of introduces everything and explains what the term demoned away means. And we get like an insight of the past history with this village of people dying and going missing. So that was the intro. The next chapter, called Watanagashi, will focus more on like the history of the village and the village's festival, Watanagashi. We get a little insight of how the festival came to be, and let's see. I'm trying to explain it without spoiling anything, but the easiest way to think about it is that basically time reverses after every chapter. So in the next chapter, Keiichi, Mion, and Rena will all be alive again, and it'll be before the festival, and everyone will be happy and friends with each other, and it's like it never happened. So, the first few chapters are question arcs. Like, we're introduced with all these mysteries, and shit inevitably goes wrong, and we don't know why. And later on, the later chapters will be answers. We get answers to those questions, like what really happened and why they keep happening. And even though time reverses and starts over again, things will happen differently. Like in this episode, Keiichi, Mion, and Rena died. In the next chapter, someone else could die, and Keiichi or the others could live. Like it changes, but there are similarities. Like every chapter is part of one whole story that connects, and it's just a matter of figuring out like what is happening and why it keeps happening, and like what is the end goal, like what are we supposed to do to break this cycle of death. And it is a really good story. Like I cannot recommend it enough. I first was introduced to the series when I was like maybe 14, 15, and I saw the anime for the first time, and yeah, it traumatized me, but I was intrigued. All the bright colors and everything were very misleading, and it soon turned very bloody and very graphic. But like I said, it was intriguing to see where it was going. And now, looking back at the series in this format, in this visual novel format, it expanded so much on what I already knew, and it shed some light on things that I previously didn't know, and I really like that. It's like I said before, I think it was during this playthrough that I prefer to watch the anime of something I like first and then go back and read the manga because there's usually more information there. That way I don't start out with all the information and then watch the anime and then I'm given less information. Then it just leaves you with an empty feeling. But that's just my personal preference. As far as continuing this series, it's probably going to be a while before I play the next chapter, if I do. I haven't decided yet. I would love to continue into the Watanagashi chapter, but I'm still not completely competent with my reading abilities. I know my reading skill is rather unfortunate, but there are moments where I feel like I can power through it and get through it. Like in this episode, I think early on I did relatively well. It wasn't until I started getting tired where I was stammering more and all that. But if you want to check out this series for yourself, the game is available on Steam. Every chapter is available one at a time, or I'm sure there's some sort of bundle you can get them all together. I don't know. I only got the first chapter for now. There's also the anime, which is available. You can probably find it on Amazon or something. I have the Blu-ray box set, which is nice. There's also the manga available. You could probably find that somewhere. Or if you would rather just watch playthroughs of it, I would recommend checking out Rose Matters videos because she does a lot of gameplay and a lot of visual novel style Let's Plays, and I believe she just recently finished Higurashi, and it's all up on her channel. So, and she is a much better reader than I am. So if you want to see where the story goes from someone else, I would recommend her, and I'll link her channel in the description. But as far as what now, I think I'm going to take a break from visual novels for now, and maybe try to study more on reading by myself. Just kind of hone my reading abilities, improve them a little bit, like learn how to read big words on the spot without being like, But we'll see. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and I will catch you in the next video. Later.